But
Now,
I think there are more and more old people also on TikTok. For example, I went to go see my family a week ago, and they were like both on TikTok like all day.
mm,
No, I was very surprised. I think more and more
interesting.
now.
I just read about this as part of my research. So it's basically like aging up, right? So like the platform as it matures,
Yeah.
you'll have older people kind of, picking it up. And the reason I think for that is to just see their kids doing it, or they're like, oh, what is this app? Oh, I want to try it out. And I mean, TikTok is really good, and I think it's the best platform at figuring out like what you really like to see, and then just serving you that. I think it takes like a
Hmm.
couple posts, that you have to go through, and all of a sudden you're getting all the stuff that you love, and that's what makes it so addictive, right?
Today I welcome Stefan on the show, so thanks for accepting my invitation.
Thanks for the invite, Martin.
You're welcome. Stefan, if you will resume your path in 3 minutes, you will do that. I'm taking notes.
So I started very long time ago. I'm already very old compared to most other people on Twitter. No, I'm not that old. So I'm 31, and I started like 10 years ago. I started my first company when I was still in college. It was the classic three tech guys coming together and building like a cool product, but there was like no market at all. We completely like over engineered everything. We, had a very solid app for like people in college that taught themselves like how to code and everything. It was like really good app, and we had one designer on it as well, so it was also really well designed and everything, but it was just like nobody wanted to use it because it didn't really solve a problem, right? So the classic average first time entrepreneur experience. And,
Yes.
that kind of taught me very early about how important it is to actually have a market, for what you're doing, and thinking about marketing and distribution and all these things. That is kind of like a meme on Twitter, that people are like, oh,
Yes.
helping doesn't matter and your only distribution matters, right? So I think that was good because I think you can read about this stuff a lot, but I think it's very hard to learn this lesson without learning it yourself, right? It's very easy to be like aware of it, like that you need to do it, but then not actually doing it and not noticing that you're not doing it and that you built something that doesn't actually solve a problem, right?
Yes.
But
This is
so
the common
after,
pattern of everyone.
after that, kind of went nowhere. I went to another consumer mobile app. So I was working in VC funded startups for 6, 7 years, mostly consumer mobile, building apps, more or less monetizing attention, right? So it's like your classic like next TikTok or whatever kind of deal. Never made it, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be here and talk to you right now. But yeah, that was the deal for a while, and we had an investor for this app that I joined afterwards. That was the guys from Candy Crush. So King
Oh, wow.
Games is the company behind it, and I lived and worked in Stockholm for 2 years in a venture studio from them, or basically they were the board and the investors into the studio, and we were just launching new mobile apps. One of them is still around. It's called Everbloom. They do creator investments now, but it did start as a video editor, similar to Visco, or a lot of the stuff that's actually now built into TikTok, right? So the idea was that you can upload like three images from your camera roll, and it makes like a very professionally looking edited video out of it for vertical videos. So for back then, Reels, or also TikTok. I mean, Musically, I think was still around back then, so it was a
Yes.
while ago. But that was what it did, and now they're doing creator investments where they help you as a creator to fund, your studio or your production, and you give a rev share from your AdSense, so like your ad revenue, and that's how they kind of create this environment where you're both incentivized to grow the channel because they make more money, but they give you money to then grow the channel faster, and that kind of creates this positive feedback loop, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so I kind of transitioned out of that just because as I got older, I got like further away from like understanding that person that I'm like building something for, right? I think you just mature out of it a bit. And like now, if I look at kids on TikTok, I'm like, man, what are you doing? But it works, but I just
Yeah.
don't understand it, So it's like, it's something where I was like, I think I need to switch gears. And so I went more towards B2B. First company I worked for there was just the two founders and me building the first kind of I don't think it was the first, but it was very early to these kind of meeting summarization tools. It's also still around. It's called Supernormal. So it's basically meeting recording and summaries and like action items, etc. And that was my first kind of touch point with more like AI tools, just summarization tools and transcription tools, the more classic before GPT kind of AI ML stack. And I noticed that because I've been a founder for like so long, I wanted to have more control, so I wanted to be the founder. And so that I gathered like four of my buddies or three of my buddies, so we're four people, and we have this small holding company, we call it, but I mean it's just one company that has a couple different assets. And we all have like different backgrounds because we went into different directions after school, so I already know them from like high school basically. And one guy is like now a machine learning data scientist. The other guy is like a finance person. And, I've been doing like product development for a long time. And that's where we are now. And it's called Niche Mates. But yeah, so we have a couple different assets. One of them is a wedding speech tool. So we write like wedding speeches with, it's basically just a GPT wrapper, trained on who we work with is a girl. She's built a brand. She's called Jen. She's built a brand around basically wedding planning, and like her brand is called Bridesmaid for Hire. So like she's basically a wedding planner on steroids. That's what she calls herself. And so we just took one of her process that she was doing already. She was selling that as a like premium tool or like a premium service, and we just made it much cheaper and more scalable because she has gotten a kid like a year ago, and she was like, I don't want to keep doing like service because I want to buy back more of my time, basically. Like I want to have more of my own time. And so we just went together and we created this tool, and now we're like a joint venture basically. So we share the revenue that's coming in, and she's doing the marketing and growth work. For example, she's the face of the organic content that we put out on TikTok, and it's just like doing explainer videos, like how to write a speech and all that kind of stuff. So more informative. And we're doing, the integration to our website and the technical part, and then also coming up with ideas around, marketing, and also SEO, which is basically our biggest channel is organic traffic via Google. And we also have a tool for that. So we have this tool called SwiftBrief that is an SEO tool, and we're using that internally to improve the tool. Like we improve SwiftBrief by using it on the other assets that we're growing, and there are more cash flow assets, so they're not super defensible, right? So it's not like the speech tool might not be around in like 2-3 years because now all of a sudden GPT does it, integrate it, or however your brain is just writing it with like Neuralink or whatever, So I don't know where that's going to go, but that's not really the goal. Like it's not supposed to be this evergreen asset. It's just like cash flow as long as it produces that, and we can be like, it's just like a strategic choice because it's also much easier to build and copy. So it's not super defensible in terms of technology. What's defensible more is like her brand, like what she's built over like 10 years. That's kind of the moat, and the technology is like very easy to copy, which you can see we have a lot of competitor tools that do similar things, right? But we're still out competing just because we rank much higher, and a lot of the traffic is actually like a lot of volume comes from search, right? Because the demographic skews a bit older. If you're at a wedding, like we usually have 24 to 35. That's kind of the people that are like looking to get this. If you were looking more like 16 to 18, that probably like TikTok would be better, as a channel. But for now, this is like a good channel for us. And I'm actually trying to, learn a bit about TikTok and viral content more, just because I want to, if we want to take it to the next level, because I think we have kind of saturated SEO for like that specific asset. We can produce like more content, but it will get less and less like relevant to the offering. So it will get traffic, but there will be like no conversions for it, right? Like nobody, or it's going to be very unlikely that there is conversions because it is less relevant. And so I'd rather than scaling that, I want to see if we can unlock social and organic, UGC ads to drive additional revenue. But it's a rabbit hole I haven't been down. So, and it's certainly a rabbit hole. So I'm, going down that
Definitely, yeah.
rabbit hole right
But
now.
I think there are more and more old people also on TikTok. For example, I went to go see my family a week ago, and they were like both on TikTok like all day.
Hmm.
I was very surprised. I think more and more
Interesting.
now.
I just read about this as part of my research. So it's basically like aging up, right? So like the platform as it matures,
Yeah.
you'll have older people kind of, picking it up. And the reason I think for that is to just see their kids doing it, or they're like, oh, what is this app? Oh, I want to try it out. And I mean, TikTok is really good, and I think it's the best platform at figuring out like what you really like to see, and then just serving you that. I think it takes like a
Hmm.
couple posts, that you have to go through, and all of a sudden you're getting all the stuff that you love, and that's what makes it so addictive, right? But that they're just
Yeah.
like so good at this. That's also kind of what I've been reading up on in terms of like ads for social content. Maybe that's something we can talk about, but it's like this approach to running the ads is basically just like posting content organically on TikTok and then seeing what gets the most traction automatically, like by the algorithm, right? So, and looking for outliers. Like if you post 10 videos and one of them gets like 1,000 views and the other ones get 100, then
You
that's like a
boost
clear sign
the
that that could be an ad if you make it a bit more salesy. So you need to add probably like a CTA or some sort of
hmm.
hook, not hook because that's in the front, but like at the end, right? You
Yeah.
need to add something where you're
Yeah.
like, okay, now click this button and check out what I have to offer, and then run that as an ad. But that helps you save a lot of money on ad spend to not put money behind ads that organically don't perform well, because that
Yeah.
probably not going to perform well as an ad either, right? Unless it's like coincidence, I don't know. But like, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a
That's
lot of like
magic.
variables. I
Yeah.
feel like in the algorithm, if
Yeah.
it's not the right time of day, all of a sudden all your stuff, like sometimes I get videos that I wouldn't say go viral, but I get like 1,000 views or something. But then other times I post 3 videos in a row and they get zero, they get nothing. So I almost feel like I'm shadow banned or something. And then I post the fourth one and then I like
Yeah.
get views again. And I'm just like, man, what the hell is even going on? I don't know what's going on. But yeah,
Yeah. That's
so
crazy.
it's interesting, and I think definitely another platform that's kind of forgotten about if you skew like a bit older. So there's definitely like older people as well, like coming on TikTok, and I think it just works the way around where it's like if it's cool with the kids, it might be cool with old people like down the line, but not the other way around, right? Like if it starts like old, I don't think it will like
No,
age
for
down, just
sure.
because that's not how the brains work, of the
Yeah.
younger
No. No.
generation, I
Totally.
think. So yeah.
But there are
Um,
also about these things of like watch population is on TikTok and stuff. I think there are also something like I see as a pattern is like we have the generation of like I would say 25 to 35. They are not born really. No, I mean our generation was not born in internet with internet. We grow with it and we have learned a lot from it. So I think we are very careful about what we're doing on it.
mm,
So our generation is clearly not on TikTok like most people I see are not. But
mm,
youngers are, but they are very careful about what they're doing. I'm not sure why. Maybe because they want to have a life. They didn't have the life. And older, I think they don't protect themselves at all. They're just like, yes, scrolling because like whatever, my life has passed already, in a way. No, but that's crazy. That's crazy. For me, that the most scary population on TikTok is the people, my parents, because like
yeah.
I see like they like shameless scroll, like don't care for 4 hours. It's like, yeah, I had fun. I was like, wow, you're not kidding when you go on it.
I mean, I think we're more aware, when it comes to, I mean, it depends on which bubble you're in, but like our bubble, we're also a bit of on the intersection of like, we want to be productive, we want to have our
Yeah,
own business, we want to build something. I think that's like, then you're more self-aware of like how you spend your time. But yeah, I mean, I agree. Like my dad, he's not on TikTok, but he will watch like TV for hours, in the evening, just
yeah,
because like that's what he does, and he doesn't see anything wrong with it. But I think it's quite common. I think what we are, like not a bit of an outlier in that sense. But yeah, I mean, the worst is when they just I see these videos, like I watch commentary YouTubers like sometimes, like some funny, like I think it's funny. And a lot
yeah,
of the videos are like old people on Facebook or something, and those are always the funniest because then they start using it as like a search engine, and all of a sudden you can see they post to
yeah.
their Facebook
The
like all
life is in
this
Facebook.
shit that they're looking for. They also don't know how to use it. That's the thing. Like,
I'm wondering if there is sense to do like short also on Facebook, because like I see many people, like old people, also going a lot on it. My dad, for example, he don't watch TikTok, but he watch short on Facebook.
Yeah, there's like
So
Facebook Reels, I think, right? So it's like Instagram
yeah.
Reels, which is like short form, and then for Facebook. And that's another thing that I've recently listened about. I think so. I heard it from two sources. One was I'm reading this Day Trading Attention. It's like a book, Gary Vee. You probably heard
Yeah,
of him.
Gary Vee, yeah.
He's like this. He's always super early to everything because that's all he does is like sit around and look for trends, look for
Yeah.
the next thing that's gonna blow up. And that's one source. I heard that Facebook is like underestimated just because it kind of fell out of, everybody all of a sudden like hated Facebook because it was like, oh,
Yeah.
it's old people only, and like I don't really care about it. But he said that it's like undervalued in terms of getting marketing eyeballs, especially also what you were saying, like the older generation. And I think it's because we tend to put too much weight behind like what we think, like me and myself, it's like I want to market somewhere, I'm like, okay, what do I use? Okay, I'm not using Facebook. And maybe it's also because we're not so familiar with the platform, like before the call, like before we started recording, we were talking about TikTok, and I'm like, how I am learning TikTok, and even like how to use it as a user to create content, just because I want to create ads, even if I'm not the one creating the content myself, but I need to know like what's good and what works and what doesn't work, and what can I do, what are the native features, like can I put like a template, or can I put like text and like text to speech, like how does it even work, to know what all I can be using to make the ads, even if I have someone else make the actual ad. It just feels very strange to me because I haven't used it before. And I feel like an old person, trying to figure out how to work something. And it's interesting, but that's like why I never really considered advertising on TikTok, because I was like, I'm not on TikTok and I don't know how it works, so I would rather just kind of stay away from it. You know what I mean? But you're missing out if you approach it like that. You're missing out on a lot of opportunity.
Man,
but that's
I am in the same. I have the same problem. I would like to start to have more like short. I see like the impact of short. For example, in the podcast. But I hate that. I hate that like from the deepest of my soul. So I cannot like. I don't watch short mostly, and I know I need to start it to understand it to kind of make them perform, because right now what I'm doing is shit. Like, my best short, I don't know, he made 1,000, a view where you can like go to millions. So definitely that's something I need to understand. But for that, you need to watch them. And I'm not sure I'm willing to do that yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think there's always a way, and I'm struggling with that too, right? So I don't want to put out content just to put out content. Like I want people to like take something away from it, or like if I do like informational content, I want people to like take something away from it. But what I am starting to just understand is like, if that's your goal, let's say your video is really good, like it's really valuable, but nobody watches it because it's just boring first 5 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever. Even like long form videos, I think, unless the people know who you are, they're not going to stick around, if you fumble your words for the first 30 seconds, you're just going to leave, right? So then it's like, if your goal is really to get people to learn something and like see it, then it really makes sense to invest in that, because otherwise you can make like the best video in the world, but nobody will like see it, right? So it's like, and then it's like combining, not being like clickbaity or, having like thumbnails like this, like where it's like shocking, you won't believe what happened, but that gets people to click, right? So now it's like, where can you find the middle ground between like, okay, I use it to package my video in a way where I get people to watch it because that's what my goal is, but I'm not like damaging my brand or my own like values, right? Like if you're not a person that likes to use clickbait to be like, shady marketing practices, things like that, then it's like, you don't want to go too far, but you also can't do too little, because then I'm not like an effective video, right? And I before this call, I was actually reading the story that's like a good example, but it's like this this app that is basically like a GPT wrapper for online dating or something. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's
No, I
called like
didn't.
it's called Riz or something. And so
Okay.
what they did was they advertised on TikTok a lot, and they lean a lot into like teenagers these days, like loneliness and just like them being don't know how to talk to girls because they barely ever interact
Yeah.
person to person. It's all just like online, and they like really lean into this insecurity basically. But it sells because it's like emotional, right? Like people are like, oh yeah, I want someone to help me like talk to girls. Like that's my biggest, especially as like a teenager, like that's the only thing you
Yeah.
think about, like you're just like,
Exactly.
girls
You
and
have
going to the
schools
gym
and
or
girls.
something. So it's like, yeah. So, like I wouldn't want to do that. So then I don't pick a product that does that, but it's obviously very effective. So it's like, how can you walk the line, between like, I always like to see things like along a spectrum, where it's like, on the one hand, it's like completely exploiting something. And then the other hand is like just being like super boring, like you have to make up the ends of the spectrum for whatever you're looking at. And then like, how can you find your position there? And try to skew
Yeah, yeah.
towards the middle, I would say, like balance it somehow. And then you can put it one step in one direction and then one step in the other and test how it feels, but you should be just like aware of like what you're doing. I think that's always helpful.
I think for a long time I totally refused to go any direction. I find like this is very bad and this is like clickbait and whatever. But now I have a different opinion because I saw like many big names. Like I know one guy in French and Mr. Beats, for example. They were like Mr. Beats was the worst. Everything is clickbait. The image is crazy. The 5 seconds he show you off the video to make you come and stay. And this is insane. But now he's saying more and more he doesn't want to do that. He wants to do more like long form content and less crazy and more like emotional and connected with people and stuff. And so I'm wondering if that's just okay to do things that works even if it's not yours and then make it yours more and more over time. So now that's my strategy. I will try to do like super clickbait thumbnails, and I will try to do like the hook on the shorts, the 1 minute super important like Mr. Beat said in the video, and I will see because I'm not watching my video anyway, so it's not really like what's matter. And if that's bring people to learn more, to discover people and to get better in what they're doing, I'm fine to use shady stuff to get them there, because many people who push you to do nothing interesting do it. So I don't see why I will avoid it, because I'm thinking like I am better, but in fact like they just got attracted by the wrong thing then. So I will just compete. I will see how it
Yeah,
goes.
it's interesting. I'm struggling with that the same sometimes, right? Where you're completely right. As long as you're doing something good, let's say you're using this to sell a course for something, right? But people actually
Yeah.
learn something versus like someone that's just pushing, the next token drop or something, that goes nowhere, and they use exactly the same techniques, but
Yeah.
you're pushing something good, but then at the same time it is also like something that can easily become justification, like you need to be really aware of like using it actually for something good, or just telling you like, oh, me making money, that's also something good, for me, but not for the other person. So it's like, it needs to be balanced as well. So that's kind of how, where I try to not see it as something bad necessarily. And that's also an interesting learning from like similar to what you were saying, like my journey now is like bootstrapped and like doing things, like maker, indie hacker, whatever you want to call it, is like I started and I gave myself like all these labels, I was like, oh, I'm not going to
Mhm.
do TikTok because TikTok sucks. I'm not going to do a project that's like not SaaS. I'm not going to do like a project that's not like B2B, so it's like all these kind of constraints. But I think we're not doing ourselves a favor, not at least
Oh
like
no,
experimenting and seeing like,
jail
does it
yourself.
work, it's just like. And so now like the last half a year, for example, I've learned, and that's an interesting learning, I think, as well, that it's like you just need to see, there's nothing that like, or not nothing, but there's very little things that inherently you shouldn't at least try. and try to make them work. Because, for example, with the two tools that we have now that we're like building, right? So the one is like very simple, just like a GPT wrapper. And I was always like, no, I need to have at least some sort of moat. But that thing is making like 5, 6, 7,000 a month. And like the other tool that we have that is like actually has a moat and is like harder to copy and is like whatever, but it's also like bigger. It's just like so much slower to build, but also so much slower to grow. And it's just something that maybe down the line, if we continue, I might have like a good exit or something, where like it makes me a lot of money. But for now, it's just been like super, super hard, and we almost don't even have the people to build it because it's so much work, And so it's like that has a mode, but it also is like B2B, and it's very sales heavy, right? So there's a lot of like sales calls and demos and help me like figure out how to use it, educational work. And with this other tool, it's like super simple. You just come in, it's self-explanatory. If you've ever used like GPT, you just like a chatbot, even not even just GPT, and you just start chatting with it. And at the end, you have a result, and you do it in one session. And then another label that I was like worrying about, was like, it needs to be subscription, because that's just transactional. Like it's just a purchase. They purchase the speech. It's one time. There's no recurring revenue. There's also no real ups. Like there's some upsell potential. So what we started doing was like offering a human version. So then it's like you do the data entry with the chatbot, but then the girl Jen, she's a writer for like Business Insider, so like some bigger publications. So she has like writing experience, and so then she goes and she gets the inputs, and then she writes the speech basically for you, and then you get a Google Doc with the speech. So then it's like a combination of like what AI is good at. It's like good data entry and like sharing the conversation like dynamically towards like what we need to find out to write a good speech. But then it is like it's okay at like writing speeches. It's not perfect because it's not a person, and it doesn't not there yet in terms of like making it read like super good.
And it doesn't understand like the emotions and stuff like that. How do you make it like connect to someone? Like only human can feel that.
I mean, right. So basically that's like an upsell, but there's no like, unless you get divorced, there's no second time we sell you that thing, or maybe you go
subscription, get married every month.
It's like divorce papers come like as a side product, It's like that's the next
Until get your divorce speech.
It's crazy. So one like interesting side story. I was in Stockholm when the pandemic was going on, so like Corona, and they had to. I think you can file divorce like online there, and they had to shut that site down like during Corona because like so many people were getting divorced because they were just like sitting next to each other all day, and they were kind of getting on each other's nerves basically. So they had to increase like the friction to get a divorce so that people would like use it or something. It was like this crazy thing, but that's just like a interesting side story. So
yeah, it's a very good side story. It will be a good show.
The thing is like, and another one is this guy Nir Eyal. Do you know him? He wrote like Hooked, where you like sell the solution, but then you sell the solution to something else. So he wrote Hooked, where he tells about like how to make habit forming products, and then like Facebook, TikTok, whatever, like get people addicted to your tool, basically your product. And then he wrote a book that's called Indistractable, where he tells you how to not be distracted by products like this.
That's funny.
So, it's also kind of catering to both sides. Probably knew that he did some damage with that, but somewhere this is the Indestructible, I think, like the book here.
Okay.
So
I will put it in the description.
But yeah, so it's just transactional, and it's like people come in, they buy it, just going back to the actual story. But I was like, oh, is that ever gonna make enough money? All the value in like SaaS is like in the subscription, and like if I want to have an exit, like subscription revenue is better, like all these things that I thought about. But it's like, I mean, I'm not actually at a stage where that matters. Like right now, for us, the most important thing is like cash flow, to have cash to pay my salary like consistently every month, and like be able to continue to work on this. And then eventually I can worry about like making something like super big that maybe makes me like financially independent or whatever, because that's the ultimate goal, right? But you have to kind of go there step by step, and it's very hard to go from zero to like 40 million exit or whatever overnight. It's like impossible almost. It is possible, but it's like the odds are not in your favor, let's call that. And so yeah, it's just like a learning phase, because like when I came from the VC background, I was like, okay, it needs to be bootstrapped because I don't want to have investors necessarily, like I don't want to any give away like control. That was like the main purpose of it, right? And it's also like you buy, like you enter this game that's just completely different than like growing sustainably, growing organically. It's more just like growth at all cost, and like no matter what the cost is, and it just needs to grow really fast. Because I was a couple times in the position, and this Everbloom that I mentioned in the beginning is a good example here, where you are basically dependent because your burn is so high that you're dependent on raising like another round of funding. And if you don't have good traction, like you're doing well, but it's not good enough in the eyes of like an investor, because he's like, okay, 10x 100x returns, or you might not even like bother about it. And then it's just like it's very hard to meet that bar. And so we were in this position with this photo editor, where they then did a pivot, or the video editor rather, because they had, I think, 30 to 50K monthly recurring revenue, which is like for a team of 4 people, that's not bad. But it's like for like a VC invested company, that's nothing. They're like, okay, I don't care. Like, I'd rather have you have 100 million users unmonetized than to make 50K. It's just a different game, So it's like it's fine. It's understandable, but at the same time, it's like as the founder, you're like in this position where it's like, do I just shut it down, or do I like try to get the investors out somehow, like pay them back? Like that's an option, right? But it's not very common, and a lot of times the investor doesn't want this. They're rather just you like die and then they have like a tax write-off or something than like paying them back or something. And so that is a position that you can get in if you're struggling, at least, right? Like if everything goes well, I think they're all coming to you and they're like, here's my checkbook, like just take my money. Like the people that are doing well, they get more, and the ones that are struggling, they're gonna just go away. And they had to pivot basically because they couldn't raise money with the existing product, because they were like, okay, you already did all these things and you make 50K, that's not enough. Okay, how do we get this to like a unicorn? Okay, I don't see this happening with what you're doing now with like the functionality or like the business model that you have. I think they raised like 2 million or something by pivoting to like NFTs when they were like hot, right? So it's like, where does the investor want to put their money? Not what you want to do, but like what they want to invest in, right? And that becomes the conversation. And I was like, no, I don't want that to happen, because like I don't care about NFTs. I mean, blockchain I think is interesting technology. I haven't seen a really useful like solution that it like like a use case that it solves better than some other stuff. I mean, that's still kind of also developing, I think, but it's like it's not a technology I understand and like not super interested in as of right now. And like I missed the Bitcoin hype, so I was also like, I'm not invested in this. And so that's kind of also another consideration why I started doing something else, because it was like, it's kind of not interesting, and I would rather spend my time on something that I think is interesting. And so I wanted to retain all this control, which means I can have investors. And then I just tried to go like the classic, what does everyone say that it's like the easiest to monetize, like SaaS, B2B, but without really like thinking about what all that means. And so B2B a lot of times will have some sort of sales. We're not going enterprise, but we are going like mid-sized business, and then it's almost the same. It's just even worse because they're not actually even willing to pay a lot of money. So it's like you have the overhead, but you don't get the reward for it, so it's like even worse than going enterprise. And so it's just something I'm not necessarily good at, and I don't necessarily enjoy, because a lot of times it feels like I'm very bad at doing things that I'm like, this feels like a waste of time.
I can't. That's also why I decided to go on my own, because sometimes, like when you are with co-founders or you have like a CEO or whatever, there are things I don't want to do, and if you force me to do it, I will be so slow. That doesn't make any sense. And very,
Yeah,
very few
you'll do
people
it, but
understood that.
you'll hate every minute of it.
Yeah. That's the thing. And some people really don't understand that. And that's make me like hate it. I hate working with others. Now I'm doing on my own, and some things I don't do it for months until I don't know, finally I see it in a different way and I can do it. But for months I'm not like this topic is dead. I put it under the grave, and I'm like, nope, not doing that.
Yeah. So what I've learned again is like maybe where I see myself, and that's what we're gonna, spend on like this
Yeah.
year, end of next year, is like something that I'm better at like B2B, because B2B I don't fully understand. Again, like sales, etc., etc. But something in the consumer space, not an app, but something that people pay for, like the wedding speech, because it's a problem they just can't get around, right? Like a wedding speech, you have to give it. You can't not. You can use other ways to get there, right? Like you can write your own. You can use a template. You can
Yeah.
pay someone $500 to do it, or you can do it with ours, right? There's like alternatives ways of doing it, but you definitely need to do
You
it.
will go.
And so thinking more in
Unless you
that sense,
cancel the marriage because of that.
what is like consumer facing, but it's something that is not, I don't have to like necessarily generate demand for it. Like a lot of consumer products, they're like, actually I don't need it, but then they're so
Yeah.
good at like making you think that you need it, that you're gonna buy it. That like that's the game that they're playing, like demand generation,
Yeah.
basically. And so I want to have something that is not useless. I don't, like you don't need it, like a
No,
vitamin,
yeah, I
basically. Like
understand.
they're pushing vitamins, right? They're like, oh yeah, you can have this like literal vitamin, like this AG1, for example. It's like these greens or something, and it's just like making you think that you need it, or maybe there's some people that actually do need it because they have some sort of deficiency,
I mean,
but that might be like,
most didn't for
yeah,
sure.
like most people don't need it. And it's just similar to when I was like younger, when I was in school, because that was what I was saying earlier. It's like when I was in school, I was only caring about like the gym and like girls, so it was just like I was taking all these supplements, and I had all these like older guys, that used to be like bodybuilders, or what is it, just like weightlifting, so not necessarily like
Yeah.
bodybuilding, but just like bench press, bench press, squat, and deadlifts. And they were all just saying like, well, you don't even need it, like it doesn't make any sense that you take it. And they knew what they were saying, but I was just like, no, I feel like I do, because I have this
I saw the
bodybuilder
ads.
guy that's like advertising, and he says like, I only take this like protein powder, and that's why I look like this. And obviously it's bullshit, like everybody knows that. But when you're
Yeah.
that age and you're like buying into it, then obviously for you it's like something like you need this because you want to be the same, like some sort of thing you aspire to be, And I think that's what it like lives off of. But I want something where it's like, because you need a lot of money to do that, right? So to generate demand, that's like very expensive. So you want to tap into existing demand, or you want to partner with someone that has that, can tap into that demand distribution, like similar to what we did with Jen for the wedding speeches. It's like she has a newsletter, she has a social following, she has a domain, which for organic traffic is very good if you can have like a 10-year-old domain with like 50 DR, because she's done a lot of work in PR. So she's
Yeah.
done a lot of backlinks from like good outlets like Forbes, whatever, all the big outlets. And so that's something where if you then pour just like some gasoline, you can make the flame grow bigger just by already having that, and it's just much faster, than starting from scratch. And so it's basically a way for us to shortcut that process by partnering up with someone, and then
Yeah.
staying in a place where it's like there is something that is a painkiller, with proven alternatives, right? Like there's a bunch of speech writing services that for other use cases, for example, because it's something that people need to do, and you haven't done it in a long time. Like the last speech I wrote was like 10 years ago or something, 15, whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's like not something I'm like actually want to spend time on figuring out, because it's like, it's what we were talking about. It sounds like a pain, and it is a pain. And so it's like, I'm
Yes.
not going to do it. So yeah,
Exactly.
it's something, but it's still consumer facing. So trying to be in that realm where it's like launching products that are faster to build, because that was one thing that's like dragging me down as like a big app, like not a micro SaaS, but like a big
Yeah.
app. That's one thing that I can actually do, really, like I've learned. And then not necessarily just thinking B2B, because that has a lot of components that I don't necessarily like enjoy doing. And then, but obviously you also can have like a vitamin. So like that will be hard to sell. So like trying to find something in that trifecta, whatever you want to call it, right?
That's very funny you say that. Like, I just realized when you are pitching the things like going to a real pain point and not a vitamin. In fact, if you look, what you're doing was probably a vitamin long time ago. It's the wedding is something cultural. I think this got implemented in the culture of people, and it becomes something like vital for people. But like, this is useless. In fact, is it like be married with someone is just like a ring you put in your hand, or like just something you say to someone, but it doesn't make it doesn't save your life. It's not like really like a real pain. It's a pain because culturally it became. So that's very funny. I realize like most of people where the work they're doing to make something vitamin become a painkiller, it's like super hardcore. And I think VC company can do that because they have a lot of money. But you can plug in to something who became a painkiller from a vitamin and paid by another company. I'm sure there are many things like that. It don't need to be vital, but it became vital to people. Like, for example, like makeup for women, it's something like many women, this is fucking vital to have fucking makeup without when you leave the house. And this is crazy because this is fucking useless. This is like, doesn't make any sense. Like, but some women, it became like really vital.
I think there's something to be said there where you're basically piggybacking off of some trend, right? Cultural or societal or whatever, right? That makes something necessary just because you don't want to stand out. It's basically like you wear makeup because you don't want to stand out as the person not wearing makeup.
Not wearing
like
makeup,
some people are, and I think that's always like, and that's another interesting thing where it's like if there's this trend, so there's this trend, let's say, that goes into one direction and everybody is wearing makeup or everybody's taking supplements, whatever. And then there's this anti-trend, like where they kind of split up, where it's like, now I'm going like natural look or whatever, right? So there's always two sides of the coin. And I think what you can pick like a niche in the trend section. Like I wouldn't head on like compete with like a mainstream brand that makes makeup or supplements or whatever. But maybe you find like a niche that is like actually attainable, and not super interesting for the mainstream competitors to go into, right? There's this like Goldilocks zone where it's like big enough for you to, like in the middle, where it's like big enough for you to, get you to your goals, and then like not so big that it's like interesting for any kind of VC competitor to come in and be like, well, now this niche is like mine as like a product extension or something, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Or you can go the opposite and you can say like, okay, I'm going to double down on like the anti-trend. And I think that's like, another, basically it's also niche, but that niche will will most likely grow over time as like people get more fed up with the other part. And I think a good example of that we're seeing now is like AI, right?
You just make me think about the guy who wrote the book, about the hook and then the indestructible. He bet on both niche.
Yeah, I mean, he's like a hedge fund, It's just like always hedging something. But I think it's interesting because it's like, and I've heard this on another podcast. I don't know if you know that guy, Greg Eisenberg, I think.
Yes,
like the startup ideas.
But yeah, I've listened.
Yeah, I also really like it. It always gets my head like spinning with ideas, and I'm like, man, I can't execute any of this. It's way too much stuff. But it's always good to, sometimes I get ideas where I can take an idea from like a bigger idea and then like boil some essentials down and use that on what I'm already working at. And I think that for that it's like perfect. Just another angle of like, how can I market this or something. But yeah, very very good. And he was also talking about basically this anti-AI trend. How some companies are like, oh, we're never going to use AI just because it's like not good enough, blah blah blah. And it's also something that I have seen firsthand with the product that we have, because the human like upsell, so that we like write a speech by hand after you do the data entry of what I was mentioning earlier, has become like more and more popular every month. So like more and more people are opting to do that over the AI one, just because I think people are more and more kind of confronted with the limitations as of now of AI and like low quality output, like not emotional, like who knows if we will get there. But I think it's also something that people are aware of, and the more, they care, I think it's like a parameter as of like, okay, I want it to be like special. It's very interesting. So there's two kinds of people that we have come in. I would say generally like there's more, but one of them is like they want a speech and they want it super fast. They're like last minute. They're like a day before the wedding. There's like, man, I procrastinated on this shit so long that I need it like right now, and I don't care if it's like only 80% there, but I need it now. That's one.
It's
And then you
better
have
than where I
others.
am right now. I'm fine.
So that's one, and then the others are like, okay, they come in like a month before, 2 months before, and then they look at it a couple times, and then at some point they like 2 weeks before they like buy or something. So they like probably explore the options, and then at some point they buy something, and often they will opt for the human's speech because it's like longer turnaround. So like it's not even an option for the people that need it now because it's like 24-hour turnaround. Like we need some time to actually do it, right? And so
a human can check.
that is like
What's the difference of the price of two? Of the both?
So the AI one is $35, and then the human is like 97 if you want 24. So it's like almost $100 if you want 24 hours, and then you can have 12-hour turnaround. So it's like faster. Then it costs 147 or something. So it's like another
It's still
$50.
very cheap, I find.
Yeah,
For
I
the
mean
human
it's
version.
because the biggest part, like she used to charge like $300, I think, for the speech. And so why that is the process worked like this. It was a form. So you would buy it, then you would get a form from her with like questions. And then people generally give like way too short answers. When you force them to write something down, they'll write like 3 words and they're like, oh, this is enough. But obviously that isn't enough to write like a good speech, right? Like how am I going to add a lot of detail to the speech about the person that I'm writing it for if I don't know anything about that person because I'm not that person, right? So it's all like locked in your head, but I can't see into your head, And so there would be a call afterwards where you would sit down for half an hour to an hour, and she would have to ask all these follow-up questions like, you mentioned this and that, but how did that actually like develop into something more? Like how has that now become like a real friendship with her? And like, why are you the maid of honor? For example, whatever. And that costs like a lot of time, a lot of like back and forth with the scheduling. And so that was like priced into the price. And now that part is gone. So now, you have to offer it. Also, you can't be super, super expensive because there's a lot of also competitors on like Fiverr or other service platforms that are also writing speeches, and you can't be like, oh, I'm gonna charge you like $500, but half of it is like automated. So people, there's some sort of expectation what you can charge. That's another reason, right? And so it's just a really, because it's like async for her now, right? So it's like she just gets the thing, she gets the notification, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna do this, now that I have some time, and I'm just gonna write it. It's just, only a third of the time that she needs for the process, I would say. And
So it makes sense.
also for the people, it's more convenient to do it from home. They also don't have to go and schedule. They just like sit at home in front of TV and they write some stuff. And what we did is
on
like
TikTok.
what we did is essentially in the chatbot, so that the prompt is instructed to just keep asking like follow-up questions if there's not enough context. So we have made a prompt that is basically self-evaluating the responses of the person that's writing, and then it will just keep asking follow-up questions, right? So you don't have the same issue where you only have like very
super
limited
curious friend who asks you everything.
Yeah, but it's necessary because otherwise you're gonna have the output is only as good as your input, because it's not a problem that the thing can write a speech that doesn't know how to structure the speech, because we also give it examples, right? So we have like few shot prompting where we give like multiple examples that are like speeches that Jen has written before. So it's trying to like emulate her style and like her how she's doing it. So that's not the problem, but it's going to be like super generic if you give like very short answers, because it's like, okay, it's missing context, right? And so we
Yeah, it
had to
doesn't
do
know you then.
something, because if we already were aware of that, that's a big problem that people don't do that. And so two other things I'm like exploring right now is also to just let you talk to the thing. So that's not implemented now, but it's something that I have on my list, where it's like you just have mic, like you just talk into the thing, because it's easier than
Yeah.
writing, similar to like what all like GPT has added for you on mobile to like talk to it basically. And then also like this like voice mode. And I want to explore like a bit of a like viral angle as well, where it's basically we take Jen, like her voice, and we train, what is it, 11 laps or something. I don't even know if you need to train something, but you can like create your own voice basically from like training material. And then you basically can have a real conversation with her. She's the bot,
Yeah,
and she
but
like you have a back and
yeah.
forth, but it's like her. So it's really like a one-to-one copy of her old process, more or less, but it's like all automated, which is like I think interesting. And like we're just going to use this for like backlinks again, like PR, because PR is similar to TikTok, where it's like needs to be like funny, shocking, new, or something else, which is like usually doesn't have a lot of utility. Like there's no utility in this really, but it's like
Yeah.
interesting. And then that they like bite for that. They don't bite for like it being useful, which is like very interesting in terms of like building a business where it's like you want to make utility, because people don't give a shit. Like people, when they use your product, they don't give a shit if it's like her voice or someone else, but like you need to get them in the door somehow, and that's how you get them. It's very contra, I don't know. Yeah.
Counterintuitive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Counterintuitive. Yeah, I know. I agree. This is crazy. I tested like I think a month ago a software where it was a landing page and you can click and open a call, and it was a IA version of the maker of the website, and you could talk with him, and he was like, "What do you want to know about the product?" And I was like, "What?" And that was a IA in real time. You can answer, "What do you want to know about the product?" And I was so surprised. I was like, "Oh, this will be a killer for sales process and stuff like that. Could be very
Interesting.
good."
Yeah, it's like already, because I only seen AI calls in terms of outbound, so basically almost like cold
Yeah.
outreach, like cold calling, but this is like inbound, right? So it's basically people come to you and they're like, "Hey, I need information," and it's like the next iteration of like the video greeting you on the website or the intercom, whatever. But yeah, that's something I see, something like intercom integrate, or like some of these existing chat
Oh,
tools,
for
just
sure they
another
will.
form of like lead capture or whatever you want to call it.
No, they will for sure. I'm wondering like how good that's perform, because there was a demo and the demo wasn't bad. Like if you try to talk about something else, it was like, "Yeah, I'm very interested about your topic, but maybe you want to know something about the website."
Maybe you want to buy my product instead.
Yeah. It was salesy, but like not so aggressive. So that was very cool. I was very impressed, like because it's the first one I try, and it was very, very good already. You can see it's IA, but it was making the job, and I was like super curious. Obviously, I forgot the name and I lost the website. Internet is like that. But
Viral marketing for them.
yeah. It was viral, and maybe people don't believe it yet. It's gonna be something.
Was
I
it
never
the
saw.
product a SaaS, or was the product like that lead capture format?
It's a SaaS. It's a SaaS. You pay to have the IA. They ask you a question about your company and stuff, and then I think I trained one for Capgo even. So I put the website of Capgo, give information, and he was answering, and I was like, good. And after, I think you pay by credit. Like you have a number of minutes or stuff like that.
But it was a demo of the product that they're selling basically, and that product is that
The landing was the product they sell. It was crazy, and then you can train it for your product. So that was good. I think we can go back to. Oh, it's 50 minutes. We've been good. I think we can go back to my question now. as we have talked about your path, was super interesting. One question is obviously for the shorts and the short content, the TikToks and so on. I want you brag the most crazy things you have done. Like, what's your biggest success as indie maker?
Crazy. Do you mean successful in terms of virality or actually bottom line or
Give me big numbers, give me like, make
yeah, I
people
mean,
dream.
so right now, I mean, it depends on your level, like your context, but I think this month we're probably going to hit 7,000 US dollars for the speech tool, which I think is the biggest tool, so far that we've built. And it's been pretty crazy because it's been only 2 months ago that we made 2.5. So it's like
Oh,
almost
wow.
tripled in 2 months. And a lot of it has to do a bit with season. So like not right now, it's like wedding season is like full on, it's like a lot of weddings going on. But a lot of it
Yeah.
also has to do with, we did a lot of work on SEO, as I was mentioning earlier. And that is actually like starting to, work. And with SEO, it's like it explodes at some point. If you hit top 3 or if you hit like first page, there's clear like jumps to it, right? And a lot of the content that we've done 2-3 months ago is now ranking top 3 for like very high traffic keywords. So the best post we have 45,000 clicks a month now, last 28
It's a
days,
lot.
and 8,000 of that is like one article. So you have these like these outliers that are like super
Yeah.
popular and they pull most of the weight. It's really like, a power law or like 80-20, where it's like 80% of your content gets nothing and then 20% really gets like the rest. And so there's some high numbers for you,
Yeah. I have also in CapGo one article which is driving like 80% of the traffic.
Yeah.
And it's something I did like I think a year and a half ago. It's like another guy from the same kind of niche making mobile apps in Capacitor. He made an article about making apps with Next.js. And I saw the article, I was like, oh, it's so good, but I don't agree with everything. So it was the really, really early beginning of ChatGPT. So I took all the article in Markdown. I have a Chrome extension to Markdown a website. So I took all the article in Markdown, put it in ChatGPT, and change a few things and use different library or stuff I prefer. And like I repack up, put it on a website with even the same images of the guy originally after I did my own images. But the tutorial basically was like, is made by ChatGPT. I wrote it at the end, even like it was his article made by ChatGPT because I knew the guy. I didn't want to get him mad, but he got mad anyway. And since then, since then, this is the article who drive me the most traffic, and I got banned from communities because of that. Everyone told me, "Oh, you're like stealing things." Like I think now everyone is doing that, but at the time I was early. I was early, and
Too
this is
early,
crazy. Like,
you still get the repercussions,
yeah, but I mean, it tripled my business anyway, so fine. Ban me from community, they get mad. It's okay. I'm making
I mean,
money.
the developer community in general can be like quite hostile. I feel like I see that sometimes on Twitter,
Yeah.
where I think now it's this like Theo or something. He posted some file upload
Oh
thing, and
yes.
everybody's going apeshit, and I'm just like, I don't interact with it at all because it's like it's just a waste of time, honestly. Like
Yeah.
it really is, unless you're like in that community and you're selling to other developers and you need to be in that community. I'm like, okay, I don't care. I'm focusing on building something valuable, and like technology is a tool that I use, right? It's just a tool, but I have other tools. And so it's just like that's what it's become, even though my background is very technical. And I think that's what a lot of people are struggling with, that it's not so important actually, like to be a good developer to make money. Like if
No,
you
no.
if your goal is to be a good developer, yes, you need to be a good developer, obviously, right? But if you are a developer and you're starting out, you're trying to grow something or build a business, then it's actually more of a roadblock than anything else, because you're so like set in certain
Fuck
ways
yes.
that you need to do something, and you assign very high value to your skills
Craft.
that you think are
Yeah.
like super important, but they're really not. And I think with tools like Cursor, like I have a lot of developer friends that are like, oh, I don't want to use it because it's so much fun to write code, but then it's not fun anymore. And I'm like, that is, yeah, I understand. And it's also
Depends
annoying
what
for me
you're
sometimes,
aiming for.
Yeah, because it's just like but it's just change, and change is always like inevitable. Like you can either move with what's happening, or you can
Or
just
die.
be out of a job, in like 2 years, because you don't want to change,
Yeah.
and you don't want to grow your skill set, and you don't want to be more productive by using the tools that you get. And yeah, it sucks, but at the same time, it's just, like I said, inevitable, right? So like either move with it or like don't, And what I always remember here is like the story of like Uber, when back in the day when they just launched, and then everybody was just like, oh, this is like nobody cares about this, and it's like not gonna go anywhere. And then you had like a lot of
Kill the fucking
cab
taxi everywhere in the
drivers
world.
that went like bankrupt because all of a sudden everybody's taking Ubers, and it's just like, yeah, I know it sucks, but it's also just like, being adaptable, it's just another form of like evolution, I feel like. And
Yeah.
I don't know, it's
But
just
I
something
think
that,
also change is killing like inefficiency. Like because many developer having fun coding, but that doesn't feed the goal of the company, for example. Many
yeah,
companies are stuck with developers like making very great code, but that doesn't solve the business. I even have that currently I have an intern in Capgo now, and this guy is a genius, like he's super good at coding. But each time we want to ship something, I spend hours to tell him don't do it perfectly, because otherwise he spent 2 months doing it
yeah,
perfectly. So now, finally, after this summer, I managed to tell him like, or you got fired, basically, or you start to ship bad code, like very bad code, you hate it. We see if users start to use it and start to complain. If they complain, this is a win. That means we're gonna make better like you like, but not before.
yeah.
And now you start to understand.
I mean, it's tough because again, it's like, as a spectrum, it's just like, what does the business want, and then like what does the individual want, and like how can you find a good path where like the person doing it is happy, but it's also like moving the business forward. I think that's very important, because you also don't want everyone to be unhappy, because then they're not going to do good work. Like what we were saying earlier, if you force me to do something I don't want to do, then I will not be doing a good job at it, right? So I think it's interesting, but I think you definitely at least need to be open to like trying things. I think that's the most important thing, right? That you're constantly like at least learning like what's out there, not necessarily like always jump on every hype. But that's again, is a challenge, right? Like if you're in a job and you're like employed and everything is going well, it's very easy to just like not look what's out there and just keep going how you've been going for the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and then just miss the point where you should have looked at this thing like 2 years ago, and all of a sudden you're like 2 years behind. I think
This
it's
is
very
smell Bitcoin, right? Your Bitcoin story. Fuck.
it's a Bitcoin story. So I'm
Or
like, I
Bitcoins.
should have bought Bitcoin like 10 years ago. But I mean, the thing is like, there's no perfect decisions. All perfect decisions only exist in hindsight, and then we kind of boil everything down to like a story, and then in that story you made all the right decisions, and that like led you where you are and stuff like that. But that's not reality, So
Yeah, I like the quote about that, saying like there are no good decisions, there are only decisions you make good.
yeah,
And
it's
for me, it
true.
makes total sense.
I mean, it's like people also don't want to hear all the details. They just want like, okay, give me the story and give me like, like you were saying, like give me some numbers. And I'm like, yeah, here's the numbers, but it took like all the shit that it took to get there, like nobody cares
But
about
no
it.
one
Just
wants
like,
to
oh,
know
cool
that.
numbers, like that's so cool.
Oh no, he's super successful. Yeah, I will follow this guy.
He's
He struggled a lot.
overnight success,
Yes.
10 years in the making, I feel like that's most people, you have some outliers and some outliers that are launching their first thing and they get really successful, and maybe they're smart, maybe it's just luck, who knows, but it's like not something I would bet on, because it's very unlikely that you will be the same. And so
Yeah.
it's something that, a lot of survivorship bias, like just how social media works basically. And that's also something that I have to be reminding myself. And I was talking to someone else about this not too long ago. It's like, when I look at my Twitter, for example, like that's a good example where it's like, if I compare myself solely on like followers and I look at all the same cohort that I started with, and I say like, okay, I'm looking at, Mark,
Yeah.
Dimitro, and like others, and I'm like, screenshot one guy. I'm like looking at
Yeah.
myself and I'm comparing, and I'm like, I have like 6,000 followers or something, and they have like 20,000. Mark has like, I don't know, 200,000, whatever, right? Or
Yeah.
also the other French guy, I forgot his name. He has an ad course for Facebook.
Ah, Dagobert.
Huh?
Dagobert?
Not, yeah, he had a Twitter course. I don't mean him, but man, why I forgot his name. It doesn't matter, but
Xavier? I know all of them. We have we have a second group in Telegram with the French Twitter guy.
he did like talk notes. What is his name? He
Ah,
likes,
Nico.
yeah, Nico, right? Yeah.
Yes, Nico.
So I think I also started like same time with him, and like they all have 10 times the followers or something. And if I would compare myself to those guys, I'm like, okay, I'm like super not successful on this one metric. Obviously, we can fight about if that's like important or
Mhm.
not important, like what matters. But if I would compare myself, I'm like way behind. But then there are like the 10 people that are still around from the cohort that I started with, and everyone else is like stopped a long
Yeah,
time ago. And
outsiders.
obviously
Yeah.
they are not even active anymore. They don't have followers at all because they're not active. And so you're like comparing yourself always like up, and you're like, oh, I'm so much worse than they are, but like I'm so much better than like 90% of others, but they just don't. I
Yes.
just don't see them, so they're not like on my radar, and I don't think about them. And that's, I think, just not a helpful thing to do, in general. But it's
Yeah.
also hardwired into human nature that we do it. And so it's like, how can I do it in a useful way? Like, how can I not like fight nature, because that usually doesn't work, but how can I, use it for something good, and I think
Mhm.
that's like a lot of things also, like on Twitter, what a lot of people like, we're not doing ourselves a favor because we see these like people that are successful and we think it's like gonna be super easy. And so like then the developers like, well, these guys make it look super easy, so I'm also just gonna do it myself. And then like they hit the first roadblock, and then they're like, oh, this shit doesn't work, and you're all
Yeah.
selling things that nobody needs, like gets like very angry very quickly. And I think it's good to be
But
aware of like how hard these things actually are, but then at the same time nobody wants to know. Nobody wants to be like, oh, this is actually
exactly.
hard.
But of course, it's not sellable. Difficulty is
Yeah.
not like it doesn't make dream anyone. Are you gonna struggle for 3 years? No, everyone is like, no, I'm gonna have to make it next month. That's works. But in
Yeah,
fact,
we're
it's 3 years or more. Like it took me
we're
10
getting
years.
like worse and
It took you 10
worse.
years as well.
We're getting like worse and worse to, because of also like TikTok and like short
Yeah,
and like dopamine, we're
yeah,
getting like worse and worse at postponing like immediate rewards and working for something with like long-term rewards, just because we're not used to that in real life. I can at any time just order myself food. It takes like 20 minutes to get my meal. I don't know, go online, play in the casino, get my dopamine, whatever your deal is, whatever you
yeah,
like doing. And it's just like at your fingertips, you can get anything, as long as you have the money. Obviously, like it is something you have to give away for it. But that's just not how it works, and it's so different to the fast feedback loops we're used to, that it takes like such a long time. And while you're in the process of it, you never really know if you're actually doing something good or if you're completely like losing, because sometimes it just takes a while until you take enough iterations at a thing that is like a diamond in the rough, but nobody wants to buy it. And you're like, okay, is it the product? Is it the marketing? Is it the audience? Like, am I not marketing to the right person? Is it just like not useful at all? And it's just like super hard to estimate yourself. And I think that, yeah, it's just not easy. But we make it look easy, and that's why people get angry.
yes. But this is what people want. This is so dumb. I
Exactly.
agree.
It's the thing, but you're giving the people what they want, and then at the same time, it's like, who's to blame? Is it you, or is it the people that want it? Like, I don't know.
But
No,
I
right?
think in a way, like we're always in this loop, or we make it look easy because people want short dopamine things and that's helped them. And then they get angry because they understand this is not the truth. But what if this loop is the normal loop, like this is the way people grow, they find it easy, so they are like dreaming about it, and then they eat by the reality, and this is hard, and they complain and they get angry. And because this anger, they have the strength to continue, to do things because they get mad and they want to prove wrong. Many people have also this energy of, prove wrong, like, this is like dumb. I want to prove like Mark was wrong, like many people are doing things because they want to prove Mark wrong. And this is a bit bad, but this is also a driver of a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, I think it really depends on what drives you, right? I think I'm not necessarily driven by anger or something like that. That's not a thing that works for me, but I think the main thing is like being aware of kind of like what works for you and what gets you results, right? And then like trying to lean into that somehow. But I remember like also like another book that's like somewhere here. It's like this guy, and he was like some like CEO book. I don't remember like the title, but it was like this guy, and he was like literally saying like, yeah, I'm only driven by like this guy that like told me I'm an idiot like 20 years ago, and I'm like, man, that can't be healthy. But like clearly it's like working for you, like I don't know.
Great. Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't think that's what Mark like intends, to be honest.
No, he don't intend that. He realized it lately on, and he was not really happy about it.
So I think everybody has to kind of find their own way, I think, and you can only give them like a starting point, but at some point people need to, and that's the thing that I would generally like recommend to people to do, right, is basically learning from people that have done it, but not like blindly copying, more just like, okay, like trying to understand like the why it works.
So you mean they should listen more this podcast?
Yeah, exactly. Just do nothing else. Listen to this podcast every episode.
Just listen.
Give Martin a lot of money. So that's the
yes,
thing.
Please subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. There are no way to give me money right now. Just like download Capgo, make mobile apps.
I'll send you some Bitcoin. But so yeah, like listen, try to learn, but also try to like understand the fundamental things at work, because there's always some sort of fundamental thing, like maybe emotion, like why a marketing thing is working. It's like emotional or whatever, right? Like why viral things are working and things like that. And trying to understand that. And then at some point you will want to have enough knowledge to reverse engineer and then do things yourself, and like maybe you copy at the beginning, but you always need some sort of analytical component to it, because you can't copy something and think it will be successful. It's most likely not going to work. But if you can be smart enough about learning from that, like, okay, why I did that and now it's not successful, why could that be? There's always something to learn. And I think at some point you just need to go out on your own. You need to go like kind of go your own way. But yeah, try to not go there unprepared. But it's better, honestly, to just do something and learn from that than it is to only consume content and never do anything, which I think is what a lot of people are also doing.
Yeah.
They're just like this thing of like, oh, I only need to listen to this one thing, or I only need to like read this one more book, and then I'll be prepared. But then there's some other book or some other thing that looks interesting, and they're like, okay, only if I do this, then I'll start, because it becomes a never-ending cycle, where it's like you don't feel ready, but you'll never be ready no matter how much content you consume or learn or whatever. What I tend to do is basically I read a lot, right? But I always have some sort of action. Like when I sit down in the morning and I read for like an hour or two, and then it's like, okay, what of this time that I now like read, what is there that I can apply to what I'm currently doing? Because that's the only way you'll actually internalize, and that's also something that took me like a long time, because I was learning a lot and reading a lot, but all these books that I've read back then, let's say 3, 4, 5 years ago, I read them, but I didn't like really internalize any of it. So now I read
Yeah,
them
because you
again,
don't
like I
apply.
reread them, and now I'm like, oh, this is actually something I should have been doing like for the last 2 years. But now I didn't when I needed it, I didn't remember it
Yeah,
because I never really like took it up and made it like part of my brain or whatever. I just forgot it.
yeah,
And in the moment I needed it, I didn't have it, and then I did it wrong, you know. So there's no, I think there's like statistics on it as well. Like you keep like 10% of what you read and you keep like 90% of what you do or something like that. So there's, you know, clear
of
indication
course.
that yeah, you need to be doing stuff, honestly. More stuff,
Yeah,
less.
yeah, yeah. I think something like most people, like we are very bad at that. Is, you know, we were talking about the reward and the dopamine you need, and most of people, when they want to do something, for example, for sport or whatever, you know, I never been a sport person, for example. And for a long part of my life, I've tried to start sport, you know, and to be a sport person. But becoming a sport person takes a lot of time. You know, it's like, it's a journey. And for the long period of time, I was like just, oh, I start sport, now I'm doing three times a week or whatever weeks. And then I failed miserably each time. And now I've realized, so I have to create my sport personality, you know, create this new part of me. So to create it, it's like a house, and you can decide to build a big house, but if you never build a house before, the change or you're gonna fail because this is complex to build a house. But if you want to go in this direction to be capable to build a house, you can try to build, you know, this is the famous like build a skateboard and then a e-scooter and then a car. So you can buy a very tiny thing, which is look like the direction you want, but you will learn how to do it in the way. And for product, you can build like a niche product for free, something like you find useful, and start with that. We should be like done in a day or 3 days. So don't make it complex. Just do one feature, no register, whatever. Maybe you have no one to use it. Maybe you have 1 million people use it. If there are too many people, shut it down because you're gonna cost you money or whatever. But it's just like iterate on this idea of making and get the reward of like, oh, people use it. Because if you did something in 2 days, made for free, not to search to the money, and you got like 1,000 people using it, it's so cool. It's already a super cool feeling. And so then you get the dopamine and you can do a bit bigger and a bit
Yeah.
more dopamine and over and over.
I think there's a lot to be said about like, you know, what you said, to make it part of your identity. I think that's really the only way to like change something. And you
Yeah,
can be like, I'm a maker, I'm an entrepreneur, whatever, but then it's also about giving yourself proof, right? So like not thinking that is one thing, but then you need to give yourself proof that that's actually true. And you only get the proof by action, like by doing something that this person that you want to be, what they do, like a maker or entrepreneur, they go and they ship stuff, you know. And the more
yes,
proof in a very short amount of time you can give yourself, it's just with any habit, right? It's like intensity is not super important, but more just like how often you do it. So
recurrent.
not like
Yeah,
do it once a week but then go all out, but do it like every day for 5 minutes is better to build a habit, right? Like the repetitions, like a muscle, you need to like train it. And so that will give you proof that that's what you are. And the more proof you have, at some point it becomes part of your identity. Then it's really who you are because you're showing that that's what you're doing, because you ship stuff every day and that's what you want, and you want to get there as fast as possible, right? That's ideal, the ideal scenario. And by shipping like small things, that will give you more proof faster, you know, than like, I know people, and that's like back to my background story, right? Like we built this first app and we built an initial version in a month or something. And then I was like the typical developer that I am. I was like, oh, I wanna. We had like
rewrite
cars,
everything.
you know, exactly. Like we did a month, and then the designer kept like refining the designs, and then I was like, we built the initial backend on Parse. It was like something like Firebase. I think it got
Yeah,
acquired by Facebook at some point or something. Then they shut it down, but it was something like Firebase, like a mobile backend as a service.
yeah,
And I was like, well, like I want to rewrite the backend, and I did it in Express or something. So like I taught myself like Node.js because I didn't know anything. I didn't know any backend stuff. And it was just like cool for me to learn about it and like doing it. And then I like rewrote it to use that backend, the API, and like Postgres or something, like some classic, you know, backend stack.
Yeah.
over just because that was cool, but obviously that didn't like improve the product at all. But it took like 3 months or something, so it's just like complete waste of time in terms of like business growth, not necessarily in terms
Yeah.
of like skill growth or like knowledge growth or something, but like these are not the same. And I think most people don't understand the difference. I didn't understand the difference. I was like, well, it's worth it because it's gonna make it like better, and then like, but yeah, that's not gonna give you more users. Like, it's just kind of useless in terms of like getting users, right? But that took almost like 2 years, and the whole process. Then I did something else, and I did this, while
Yeah.
you're doing it, you're always like, so it's so easy to justify like delaying it like another month or something, that you like will launch it, because it's like becomes like sunk cost fallacy at some point as well, where you're like, oh, now I spent 3 months rewriting the backend. I might as well give another look to the app and like spend another month like redoing all of this and like
Yeah.
doing the latest like design patterns and like all the shit that it's like super clean code, or like I just read like clean code, I'm like, oh, my code is shit, I need to redo it and stuff like that. And it's also essentially there's only like two things, right? Like you either go towards like pleasure or you hide from like pain, like you go away from pain. And I think why I kept doing it is like it's really painful to like launch something, and that's also what I think a lot of people are struggling with, because you're opening yourself up to like public
Failure.
scrutiny. People are like, well, this
Yeah.
shit sucks, like it doesn't do anything, and you're like, oh yeah, you're right. But it's like it's such a big mental barrier, because I mean,
Yeah.
let's be honest, it's also like 95% of people, they just don't create something, but it's very easy for them to like judge what you're doing. And I think that's what makes it like so special to be like in this like Twitter bubble with like all the makers. It's just like no person that's like really doing something, like it's like an entrepreneur themselves, no matter how shit your product is, they'll never like just bash you for it. They'll be like, well, it's cool that you're doing something.
Yeah.
It's just like we build each other up. Like we don't tend to like, even if your product is bad, you're still gonna learn something, and you at least like showed something that you're doing something. And I think that, but that initial barrier, I think that's also what a lot of people are struggling with, which makes it like super easy to continue to learn or improve or not launch, because it's like you're staying in your comfort zone, right? It's like your comfort zone to build, but it's not your comfort zone to market, or it's not your comfort zone to launch. And it
Yeah.
also, just from my personal experience, like it took me like a long time to get over this. And for the designer, it was the same, right? Like for me as the developer, I want to make sure it's not buggy, it's like clean code, it's like works well and it's like fast or whatever. Like that's my benchmarks. But like for the designer on the team, he was also just like, well, I have all these design friends, and like if they think my UI is ugly, like, oh no, I need to like redesign it to make it look better. Like I need to make like what is it? This thing where always designers go and they post like all this stuff that no one will ever implement.
Dribble. Yeah, it's Dribble.
Yeah, Dribble. So it's like he made all this shit, and then it's also like half of it we couldn't even implement because we didn't know how, but it looked like super cool, And I'm like, yeah, but that's also like that's like the designer way of like not launching, but like improving. They don't want to make sure the code looks good, but they want to make sure the UI looks good. But in the end, it's just the same problem. Like you're trying to not have this pain of like people looking at it and going like, yeah, this shit sucks, because, and that's the thing with software, right? Like you're competing with everyone out there, and like you're competing with like huge teams that have like huge budgets. Most people don't know what early stage software looks like. Like when we work with partners, sometimes I give them like a first version and it looks like absolute crap, but it works at least like somewhat. And then they're like, oh, but it's missing this and it's missing that and it's missing this. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not just because you saw Microsoft, whatever, Excel 20 years after it got launched, doesn't mean that that's where they started. They started like looking exactly like this, like absolute shit, but that's just how it is, but people are not, they never get confronted with this, and they also don't really understand how, unless you're in the maker bubble, like, but if you show it to your family will be supportive. They'll be like, well, this is cool. I'm never going to use it, but it like kind of looks cool and I'm proud of you for doing something. But like, if you go, outside this bubble, then people are just like, this is completely like raw and unpublished, like unpolished. And so it's like, there will be criticism, but it's also something that you need to learn to tune out. You need to listen to it. Like, you need to try to understand the core of it, like what kind of core truth is there, but you need to discount it with like your stage that you're in, and you're aware of it, that it's not like perfect, because it's just not, but you need to get to a place, but you need to find out if it's even worth your time. I think that's what you're trying to find out, right? If it's like even worth your time to invest in this, or if you should just do something else. And it's this like concept that I like to, like explore versus exploit. Have you ever heard of this? It's basically like,
no, but
it's basically
I know the one where the guy say like he's an investor, and the money he invests is his time. So you need to look at what is a good investment and not in your time, to know what kind of task you should do and shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, that's all about like return on investment, right? Like, that's also what a lot of people forget. I think it's like your time is also worth something, even though I would argue it's even the most valuable thing, but obviously it's easy to be like, well, I don't have money because I'm just starting out, so I'm just going to invest all my time. But it's not like it's free, like you're giving away your life basically for something that might not be worth it. And that's the worst part, like your money you can always get back, if you know how. It's more like a skill, and if you acquire that skill, someone can take your money away, and you can, like get it again because you know how. But like with your time, you can't get it back, right? And so that is, I think, a very valuable learning. And the faster you can make it, the more time you have to make something valuable, But this explore versus exploit is kind of like, there's always two modes, right? Like we were talking about SEO earlier, where it's like you have a lot of people that say like, oh, you need to just publish like a lot of content. Like you need to just throw shit out there just a lot, same with like the idea stuff, where it's like launch something very fast and just launch like hundreds of things very fast. And then there's like, that's like explore, right? So they're both tools where it's like when you explore, you're trying to do as much as possible in a very short amount of time, but you don't necessarily want to go like super deep on any of it, because you're just exploring. And then you have exploit, where it's like if you have found something while you were exploring, you have found something that you deem like worth further investment, like of your time or money, whatever, like resources essentially, right? Then you really want to like double down on that. And it's just like being aware of like what mode you're in, like sometimes if you don't know what you're doing, maybe it's just best to explore and just launch a lot. And I try to find something that's like worth like going after. But what a lot of people do is like they have something and they want to like exploit it, so they want to like double down on it, but then they keep like launching other stuff that just gets them distracted, so they never get traction on like the one thing that they should be going after, because there's other shiny things that look like more interesting. But I think it's and there's a place for it, right? I think it's a percentage that you should assign, where it's like I'm doing 80%. Like at first you start 100% exploring. If you have nothing, why not? Like that's what you need to do. And then at some point you need to switch from like 100% exploring to like 80-90% exploiting, and then 10 to 20% exploring. Like you always want some sort of like exploration happening. That can be within the same project, or that can be like another project that you do like on the side if you want to, or just like tool sets that you're exploring, like learning how to use Cursor or something. That can be like an explorational part. And that's the same with like SEO. Like what I like to do is like I want to publish a lot of content somewhat fast, just to cast like a wide net where we can actually get traction on a certain keyword on a certain page. And then once I have that, I go in and I really start updating. I add like infographics. I add like reinforce the target keyword, like make sure everything is like super good. Because then when that is happening, like what we were saying earlier, right? Like 1 or 2 pages, like I think for us, it's like 10 pages drive like 35,000 traffic out of 45. And then the rest is spread between like 100 pages or something, right? So it's basically like these outliers, but those you want to make like really good because you want to get the most out of them. But then once you hit like diminishing returns, right? Like you can spend forever making this page perfect, like rewriting it and doing it again and blah blah blah. But it's not gonna improve significantly at some point, right? So there's a point where your return will diminish, and that's the point where you need to then start again to produce a lot of content to find outliers and like then rinse and repeat, just always like in iterations and circles, whatever you're doing the same thing. And that's the same with like pages versus like projects. Like if there's a phase where you need to explore, but the main importance I think is that you just are aware of like what you're doing, what phase you're in, and you're using the tools for the phase at the right time. You know what I mean? Not like using like launching something, you have no users and nobody cares, but then you spend 2 years of your life on it. Like you're trying to exploit something that's not worth it. Like that's not the right approach, but also not like having something that would be like a diamond if you would put more time and resources into it, but then not doing that, but then launching 100 other things instead, when you shouldn't.
I think that's the main two things. That's the main to be like very honest with yourself and don't have ego. Because most of people are like, yeah, I'm sure that will work. But the thing is, ask yourself why you're sure about that. If you're sure because you convince yourself this is wrong, if you have data backing up your decision or experience because you have done that many times, okay. But most of people don't have that and they're like, yeah, this is the best idea to think. And this is just ego driven, you think you're the best in the world. And no, you shit in many things, you're bad. And you have to know that and to accept that. And this is okay. This is okay. Everyone is bad in something, you have to start bad. Otherwise you cannot start. No one start and he's I don't know, the best football player in the world. Everyone start is bad. And then they train and like progress. And then you get like the knowledge to be able to know and to feel what is good and not. But at the beginning, I find often like people are very convinced. Like I saw so many videos of people criticizing Mark, for example, like this is bad, this is not making good software, whatever. And this is a guy which is 18 years old. And you're like, yeah, good luck, man. Like it will take you time to understand what's your mistakes.
I mean, it may not even be necessarily wrong, but it's
it's not wrong.
Not keeping the context in mind. I think that's the problem, right? Where it's like, okay, this is not like enterprise clean code software that like a 50 developer team works on and they all need to be able to read the code. It's not that. It's just like, okay, how can I get to results fast? It's just like looking at, I don't know, like scissors and then saying like I can't use them to I don't know, tie together my shoes or something, because it's not the right tool and it's not the right context.
Correct.
It's just like, well, thanks for pointing that out. But yeah, I mean, it's that's like something that, again, like what I was saying earlier, right? It's like it's easy to do, like it's easy to criticize, but it's hard to create something. It's just how it is. It's like I always like to think about, because you were saying you're not a sports guy. I used to play like football, like soccer, for Americans, but for us it's football for a long time. And I always like to put like parallels to that, when you go to a stadium and people watch like, or they sit at home, they watch like World Cup or something, and then they're like, well, I would have even like made this goal. What the hell is he doing? That's always that's like the same thing. It's just like,
and you're sitting with your beer on your sofa,
200 kilograms with like 3 beers next to him, and he's like, oh, I would have made this. I'm like, yeah, of course, but you would have like ran one time up and down the field, and then they would have had to substitute you because you're done.
Yeah.
So it's the same, it's like spectators basically. And it's like, that's the thing. I think no one that's actually like doing something useful, and is like good at what they're doing, unless they're an asshole, which they do exist. I mean, there's outliers for everything. They will never, like tear you down like this. At least there will be criticism, but it will be constructive, or they will just like, because it's not good to like blindly hype someone up if they're doing something wrong, like that's, I think there's this like friendly versus kind or something like that, where it's like it's friendly if you just say like, oh, what you're doing is really good and you should continue to do this, but
Yeah.
that's going to send them down the wrong path, versus being kind, where it's like, I see that you're doing something and that's great, but I would think about if this is
You
really
can
like
improve that
solving
and
a
that.
problem for someone. I don't think like someone is going to pay money for this. That's what I always do. I'm like, okay, I think it's really good what you're doing, but I have doubt that there's like a market for this, and that's the
Yeah.
kind thing, because you don't let people waste their time on something that might not be useful, or at least to get them to think about it. I mean, you can't really force them to do something, right? But
That's interesting what you're saying. Like, I just realized on Twitter, most of people I saw criticizing, it's not easy for French people to say that. Um, it's basically people that do new shit. Like, the people I see that are like making money and making stuff, they never spend seconds to criticize anyone. Like, they're just like doing their stuff, and
yeah,
it's
I
already a
mean,
lot.
they also have, exactly, like that's the thing. Like, you have so much other stuff to do because you're actually
Yeah.
executing something, you're building something yourself, that you're like, either you say, hey, this is great, or you say like, hey, this is great, but I would maybe change this one thing,
Yeah.
or you just ignore it because you have better things to do. It's like, I am ignoring like all this drama because I'm just like, I don't care enough, to
Yeah.
get involved. It's just a waste of
I
time.
have shit to do. Don't die, please.
I'm trying. That's what the water is for, I think. Was a good idea.
Ah, yes, yes. Got a bit of water. I think we can go to my next question, and then we can finish this episode. It was super nice. I really enjoyed talking with you, Stefan. Next question is, what has you been your biggest struggle lately?
Always struggling.
Yeah, of course.
I like
Otherwise,
to
it's not be
say,
fun. I think we need to be BDSM people at one point when you are like,
bro, it's flagellation, like self-flagellation, just
yes.
like with a
Ah,
whip.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
A bug. A guy
Yes, someone
complained.
called me an idiot again. Yes, amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. No, but I think what I've been starting with is, I was kind of like burning out almost, in terms of like a bigger thing, where it's like we have multiple projects, like what I was, saying like earlier
Mhm.
in the episode, where it's like, and they all demand attention and they all have traction, but they don't have like enough traction to be like, okay, this one
Focus.
is really a
Yeah.
winner, and this one is like paying my salary, and I can just, buy some of my time back to do something else. And so it's like we're trying to grow all these things at the same time to get one of them to a point where it does do that. And I think it's just going slower than I'd hoped, right? Like now I was saying, okay, this one project is close to doing that, but it's just something, I woke up then in the morning and I was like, I kind of don't want to work on any of this. Like I was getting there, and I had a burnout before, like a long time ago, when I was still doing like the app stuff, because I was
Mhm.
basically 23, 24. There was like some traction on the product that we're building back then. It was like the first product. And then I was just like, okay, I'm not going to have any contacts with my friends. I didn't really see my family. I was just like building, because I was like, well, if I just try hard enough, it will go, and will be unicorn, whatever
Yeah.
you're thinking when you're like 23, 24, and you're just like dreaming basically. And so I did have a burnout back then, and so I'm better at like listening to the signals, like what I feel when I get close to it. And then again, it's like self-knowledge, like reflection, just like asking yourself like tough questions, like what am I doing? Is this still the right thing that I'm doing, etc. And
Mhm.
so it was just like a lot, and I was just trying to like keep it all going. And so I went on vacation, and I was like 2 weeks where I didn't do much at all, just like because we were camping, and it was like in the UK, and then sometimes I didn't even have signal, it's like remote areas. And so yeah, I just like really reflected, and I implemented a lot of changes in my morning routine, like when I get up, because I've noticed that when I get up and I immediately start thinking about work, I have a journal where I like reflect like twice a day, right? So I like sit down, I'm just like, okay, what's going on? Like, how am I feeling? And when I skip that, I get like really miserable, like all day, because I'm lacking the foundation of like a good day. But what happened is like there was so much stuff to do and going on, because I need to drop some things. I need to delegate more, like all the classic problems that everybody has. Or maybe I should have less projects, but I kind of also enjoy having a lot of projects, a lot of like homemade problems. But I would immediately get up. I would think about work. Like sometimes I would even wake up earlier and I would think about like, okay, these things I didn't do yesterday, I need to do them like right now. And then I would go and I would just start working. And I wouldn't have like a solid like foundation for the day where I sit down for 10 minutes, drink my coffee and do some journaling, and then I'm like, okay, now I'm actually gonna work on the right things, not just like on the most urgent thing, but actually on the thing that is actually also most important. That are usually those things are not the most urgent ones, because the most urgent ones are just small pesky tasks that come thrown at you from a lot of times by someone else or by customers or by whatever is out there. And so that is what I was struggling with, to just like keep going more or less. And I've implemented a lot of changes that I think are helping a lot. So in the morning I really just read, I journal, I write down what I want to do, and I've learned about myself that the best way for me to build like habits is to have something in my visual cues basically. So I have this here because I'm a gambler, but I have these poker chips, for example, where it's like I have 4 different colors of pens for 4 different kind of areas of like what I do, like execution strategy, or like I call them important but not urgent things. It's like from this 7 habits of highly effective people, I think. It's like the quadrant 2, he calls it. If you notice Eisenhower matrix, it's like urgent and important, or not urgent but important, then urgent but not important, and like not urgent, not important.
Not urgent.
It's like the different areas of your tasks that they fall in, basically. And so I have these poker chips because I am betting, a gambler, but I'm betting how I'm gonna spend my time during the day.
No,
so I'm like
that's
saying,
so
okay,
cool.
one chip is like 1 hour, and so now it's like right next to me. I have this like visual cue of like, okay, you wanted to do 4 hours of like urgent but not urgent but
You will
important
make it.
work. It's already confusing myself, so it's definitely not going to be very useful for the content. But yeah, it's just like something where I'm like, this is how I told myself I would spend my day. And then every hour, and that's like, again, like habit. Every hour you do it like a lot, so you have a lot of repetition. I
Nice.
pull over like one of them and it's like, okay, now I did this, and that's what I wanted to do. And like at the end of the day, I also have a visual representation of like how I wanted to spend my time and how I did. And then I can make the difference, and I can like adjust. I can be like, okay, why did I spend like 2 hours on these not important things that I didn't want to do, but then I did anyway, and why? And like constantly like course correcting and things like that. So that's actually made me more productive during less hours of like heads down work, just because I'm working on the right things, or like more closely on the things that I want to. Does that make sense? So yeah,
it does. It does make sense. I think we have this thing where we always like think, we have this idea, and I think this is also ego driven. You have like I'm today, I will work like 4 hours on marketing or email or whatever, something on a blog post, and finally at the end of the day, if you don't do what you're saying, you like spend 3 hours on Twitter, and then you learn about 2 articles how you can improve your code, and then you answer 2 people in the support, and at the end, where was the fucking article? You didn't do anything, and they keep repeating that over and over, because it's easier to get driven by what is easy than what should be done. So it definitely makes a lot of sense to have this system where you self-verify daily you're not doing shit, because sometimes for days I see I'm not doing the right thing, but I've done the things that was please me, please my mind. And so having the system like daily is very, very like helpful. I wish to be capable to follow it, because I have a hard time to build habits. I'm a machine of change. I love change. I fall in love with change because that's helped me to grow when I was younger. And now I change all the time, everything. Now I'm in Buenos Aires, I'm traveling, change background, change everything. Like I'm waking up early now, where for most of my life I was not waking up early. So it's very hard for me to build new habits, unless the habit of change.
That's also
But yeah, it is. It's the one I keep from the longest. But the others is very hard to do. For me, my life is built in a way not made for keeping habits, unless the one of change.
Honestly, I think it's not really important, like what you do, as long as it works. That's what I think. I'm not sure, like my habits that they make sense for you. I mean, you say they don't, and that's completely fine, right? And that's also something where we are pressuring ourselves too much to follow like the billionaire morning routine, because that's what the guy does. Like all these fucking videos, they're super popular. I don't know why, but it's just like, oh yeah, then I meditate for 3 hours and then I do a cold plunge, and then it's like, okay, but then when do you actually work? Just because that guy is doing it, that has zero correlation with success. It's only like, okay, maybe having the discipline to do all this, and not being distracted by your phone. Like that foundational level, there might be something that's like correlated to being like a successful person or someone that executes, but it's definitely not if you do like cold plunges or meditate or write everything down. Like only if it works for you. Like if it gives you something, do it. But if it doesn't, then like you don't need to copy that. Like you just need to understand why it works if you can. I think that's the best. But yeah, so for me, it's really visual cues. Without visual cues, I also can't build any sort of habits. So I always need to have like objects. I also have this thing, which is like a what is it? This called like a stop? No, sand. I call it sand watch because that's like a literal translation of like hourglass. I think it's what it's called. But sand watch.
Yeah, hourglass. Like yes.
Literal translation from like German, because we always combine
from your roots
two different words. We take them and then we just combine them. So it'd be like sand and watch. It's like Sanduhr, if you want to know the word.
It works. It defines exactly what it is. In French, it's even a word. It's funnier. It's like a sandler, like a sablier. It's like something with sand. It didn't give you any clue of what it's doing.
Because like hourglass doesn't even make sense. It's just 1 minute. Like the thing is just like it takes 1 minute to go, and then. But yeah.
Yeah, not even better.
we found the word. So it's like without these, I can try to build any sort of habit, but I won't succeed. And that comes back, like I think the thing you can invest the most in first, and you need to, is really just like understanding yourself, like what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and then like leaning into that, and also not doing too many things at the same time. Like I'm trying to build like 2 or 3 habits at the same time. I wouldn't like suggest that. I think you should stick to one if you can.
Yeah.
I want things like fast, so I'm trying to do it all, but I'm probably gonna fail. But that's again like just learning, like you're gonna fall flat on your face and you'll be like, okay, out of the 3 habits, I kept one, and now I need to build the second one, or maybe I need to approach it in a different way, and I need to build it differently. Maybe it just wasn't the right way to do it, So I think that's.
I think for me, what make me like succeed the most in changing habits and changing who I am is just like try again, because you will fail in whatever you're doing. So accept that, take it as something, and try again. Like keep it in your to-do list and try again. Like for sport, like it took me 10 years to be able to add something like recurrent. Now it's still not perfect. I'm going once a week, I do like CrossFit, and when I was in Madeira, CrossFit and then climbing, but it took me like so long to just having one a day, But I'm keep trying it and improve the process. And I think this is the same for building a SaaS, building whatever, an habit. It's just like try again and try over and fail and try again a different way until you find what works for you. Because you can read all the books or all the video or all the podcasts in the world. The only one thing that works is yours. It's not the method of anyone. It's the one who is like made for you by you. And so to find it, the only way is to try many as much
And
as you can.
the thing is, like, I think there's also studies about this where the most important thing is persistence rather than like being intelligent or something. It's just like you're not giving up and you're not necessarily trying the same thing and you expect the result to be different, but you're like also have the the foresight to change something about your approach or how you've been doing it or giving it more attention or giving it more time or whatever you're doing, right? To just keep trying, and at some point you will succeed if you do it for long enough. It's all a matter of like timeline, and how much time you want to give yourself to succeed, because I feel like some people, they put themselves into a lot of pressure where they say, okay, I have 1 year to succeed. And for some people that can be motivating because they're like, they need this pressure to do something, right? Like they're like, okay, I only have 1 year, so now I need to really go. But what's going to happen a lot of times is like they're going to do nothing for 11 months, and then the last month they're going to scramble to do something because that's just how it is. You're pushing it out to act until you're like almost too late. And I think some people, that can just be distracting, right? That can be like too much. And I think they need to try to build something on the side. But then again, it's like, okay, which person are you? And there's probably no one approach for all of them. Also kind of depend on how many obligations you have, or like how many, if you have a family already, that makes it harder. If you have, like, I have 2 dogs, which also like cost money, to maintain and stuff. It's not a baby, but it's also not nothing. It's also
Kinda.
like time, and so it's
It's
like
the first step, on the startup journey. The first you get the dog, then you get the baby.
yeah.
You
And
go
it's
harder
like,
and
I
harder.
need to pay rent now, like when I was building my first company, I was just like living at my parents' house and I didn't pay money for food. I didn't pay money for rent, So I was just like, that was the dream, but I didn't really make something out of it, so that's like kind of a regret, so to speak, where it's like, okay, if I could have used this time better to launch more, maybe I would have already been, further along the journey now. But instead, I wasted like 2 hours to learn my first lesson, basically. Sorry, 2 years, not 2 hours. That would be fine.
It
But
would
2
be
years.
nice, 2 hours.
But it's like just failing fast, I think, is the most important, because then once you fail, you can learn, and at that point you wanna be as fast as possible. And I think I don't know. I don't really have regrets, in terms of like, it's all hindsight. Is again, like maybe it would have been a super polished product, and maybe I would have been lucky, and maybe there would have been a market, and then it would have been really good to have like a already polished product and like, hit the market with product market fit. But obviously that didn't work, and it's not something I would bet on. That's the thing. Like you can get lucky, but like maybe you most likely you won't. And so then it's like, it's not strategy to be lucky. It's just guessing.
That's so dumb to try to do that. But yeah. I think we can go to my finishing question right now, because like we're almost like 2 hours in the making right now. I'm not sure like everyone will listen up to here, but if you did, thank you a lot. That was great talk, Stefan. If you listener like the podcast, please subscribe, do things, share it, send us money, whatever, send us Bitcoin. But you can also send thank you by Twitter to both of us, or have question, or even tell us we did shit and we should have talked about something else. Whatever your opinion, please share. Now to the finishing question. Do you have a quote you really like, Stefan? Something you repeat yourself, maybe your dad quote or whatever?
I have a couple, but now that you put me on the spot, I don't think I can remember.
Yeah, that's always like that.
No,
Take your time to think about it.
You don't. Let me see if I can find.
It's okay. It's okay. Otherwise, I have another question for you. Maybe this one you will answer it easier. Is who I should invite after you in this podcast?
There's this guy on Twitter. I don't know if you've come across him. He's called Fekri, I think. Have you heard of him? I think he's interesting because I've seen him recently, and I'm like talking to him. Also had a call with him. Very nice guy, and he's also building like GPT wrappers, basically. But what I found interesting with him is that he already has been on Twitter as long as I am.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen him until like recently. Like I haven't really like noticed him. But now he's also like starting to slowly like get some traction with all his projects. That made me like made him pop on my radar, and I think he's like doing like really well. It's just interesting to me that I haven't seen him before. You know what I mean? Like we've been
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
journey for the same amount of time, but I just never have seen him until now. And I think he would be interesting to talk to. I think he has an interesting case as well, because I think he's still employed. He's doing
yeah.
it on the side, so it's a bit different than me. And he also has like his family that he needs to support with like his
Uh,
salary. So it's like he's playing on like hard mode. You know what I was saying when it's like
yeah,
you compared to that, I don't have responsibilities, but compared to my 20-year-old self, I do. So it's kind of like
yeah.
maybe interesting the kind of
Yeah,
stuff that
send me his profile on the chat here or in Twitter. I will have a look. And another question: did you find a quote or not?
yeah,
Or we
I
skip?
was looking at my Notion in the meantime. So I am like a big fan of Stoicism. I don't know if you know what that is, like
Yeah, yeah.
philosophy,
I
basically.
love to.
I also have like Marcus Aurelius here. Do you see it? That thing?
Ah, yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh wow, the
So
boost. Yeah.
it's basically it's a Stoic quote. So it's like life is long if you know how to use it. That's in my quote collection somewhere, and I think that's what I've noticed recently. You know, like back when I was just in the trenches, like building something and like never meeting
Mm-hmm.
friends and never doing anything else. It's like everything kind of becomes this blob, you know, where it's like, oh, all of a sudden, like 3 months are gone and you haven't done anything other than like the same thing every day. And looking back, you're just like, okay, what just happened to my life? You know, like, why, where is it? And I think if you challenge yourself to be like more present, to do more different things and have more experiences as well, you know, like in your life, the most long things that like seem very long is like when you do something new or something interesting, or you travel or something, and then all of a sudden like 2 weeks they feel like 3 months, and then you're like, oh, I'm kind of ready to go back because I want to do something. I don't know if you have a similar feeling sometimes, but most of the time
All the
now I
time,
feel
man.
like this on the weekend, where it's like I go out like with my girlfriend, we go out to like a city nearby or something, we do something
Mm-hmm.
interesting. I don't work at all because I work like every day, all day, you know, like not all day, but long enough. And so it's really interesting for me to touch some grass, how people say sometimes, because that makes
Yes.
me feel like I'm so ready to go back to work, you know, because now I've like experienced other things and now I'm like more motivated to go back. That makes sense. So it's like also like, you know, if you want another quote, like everything is relative, you know, like with relativity, where it's like it's the same amount of time, but it feels completely different just because you're doing something completely different. And I think you know, life is essentially not just about like building your company. There's like so much more to it. You know, obviously you want to do it, but it's just one part of who you are and what you do. And I think that it's always good to keep.
Okay, thanks for this
I'll leave
quote.
you
It's
with
very
that.
cool. Very, very cool at that one. I will think about the whole day. Think about my life. So the last question is the easiest one. I think is where do we send people who wants to know more about you?
So I am probably the most active on Twitter or X. It's at Stefan backwards, so Nafets, and then Wirth. So my last name and my first name, or first name and
Yeah, for
last
the
name.
people who struggle, it will be on the description of the
Yeah,
podcast
it's
in the link section.
honestly, I created this profile like in 2014, and I never thought anyone would want to type that in or something. So I definitely didn't do a good job. It's also my first Gmail, like my first email address is that. And whenever I have to like, what is it, not pronounce it, but like spell it,
Ah,
then
yes.
people just are like, what? And I'm like, well, it's just
What's
Stefan
happening?
backwards. But then they're like,
Uh,
I don't know how to write Stefan, because you can write it like in different, you can write it in different ways, you know,
yeah,
like
with
PH
PH
or
there. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
and or like I have. It's also a funny story. I have this cafe nearby, and the guy, like I go there sometimes to like do co-working, and the guy always calls me Steven, and I have given up like correcting him. I'm just like, hey, yeah, I'm here.
Hey, I'm
I'm
Steven.
Steven. Sometimes I take like a while to respond, and then he's like, Steven, Steven. I'm like, oh yeah, right, that's
Ah,
me.
yeah, yeah, it's me.
So yeah,
Oh
I
yeah.
definitely do a good job, but now I have this handle like everywhere, so I'm like, okay, I can't change it without breaking a bunch of stuff. So now I'm just gonna roll with it. But yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
do a good job picking that. And I also have a YouTube channel, same handle, and I have a newsletter. But yeah, they're more experimental. They're also not very big. You know, like I said earlier, in the beginning before we record, I think I'm
Yeah.
just an idiot on camera right now. That's the stage I'm in. But you know, and that's another quote that's like here in the yellow. It's like, if you wanna, what is it? If you want to be contempt, don't be afraid to be foolish and stupid. So that's also something that you just have to try. Have to be fine
Yeah.
with like looking like an idiot because that's how you start and that's how you make progress. That's what I'm doing
Yes.
every day.
There are no idiots. It's just people trying their best.
It's true.
I think. On these quotes, I think it's time to finish this episode. Thanks a lot, man, for your time, for these 2 beautiful hours with you. I really enjoyed this talk. You can
Martin,
answer. And for the
great.
people who have we have stayed until there, I'm blessed. Have fun and see you next week for the next episode. Bye bye.
And send money, Bitcoin.
Yes, send us Bitcoin.